Hello, everybody, and welcome to another bite-sized branding show. We have an awesome show. I really like having multiple guests. It's always a lot more fun. It's a lot more um, momentum when we've got multiple guests. We have two great people that we're featuring on the show today, Saurabh and Charlie, who are both in the business consulting space, and they're going to bring a lot of their insights and knowledge across a bunch of different questions that we have for them today, all around how to approach the market and how to market effectively. And as always, welcoming Grant as well, my right hand. Are you actually on my right hand? Well, you are in the video, but not really. There, that right hand, my right hand guy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Great to be here, Bernard. Thanks for having us on.
Before we kick it, mate, it's an absolute pleasure, everyone. I was just about to start rattling off on something else. I didn't even say thanks back. Before we kick into the show and all the questions, I know Grant is chomping at the bit to get into it. I'll kick it to you, Grant, first. Give everyone a little idea of how the show is going to break down today.
Fantastic. Well, Bernard, thanks very much. To all our guests, welcome. My name is Grant Tom. I'm known as the head fire starter of the marketing and advertising industry. And what that means is I like to get ideas generated. I like to create value for my clients, and I like to make brands valuable. So today, we're going to have a jam-packed show in the sense of two very experienced business consultants. So I'm going to be wearing my brand scientist hat with a view to be able to push and evoke keynote stories and insight from the industry. What's important about our show is that it's normally 5 segments of 3 shows. But this time, we're going to extend it by 2 extra minutes just to make sure that we've got enough argy-bargy and enough space for Bernard to interrupt. So over to Bernard with the view to introduce our guests. I'd love to know more about your background and who you are, and let's get the show started.
Awesome. Thanks, Grant, for that. Yeah, let's kick into it. I'll kick it down to you first, Saurabh, if you want to give everyone a little idea of what you do, how you do what you do.
Sure. So I've actually been in business since about 2005. Started 3 startups which were sold profitably. Currently, I'm into the consulting space, so I work with a lot of startups and growth organizations, taking them to the next level. So that's a bit of my background in a very short nutshell. Yeah, that's what I do.
Super short nutshell. What was the name of your company, just for everyone that's listening?
Sure. So my company is called Taso Consulting Group. So it's Target Solutions, Taso Consulting Group.
Taso Consulting. Cool. And Charlie, introduce everyone to yourself and what you do.
Cool. Thanks, Bernard. So I'm Charlie Winn from Orchard Coaching. So we're a business coaching group, and we focus a lot on leadership. In fact, the key challenge that we focus on solving is for agencies that are trying to grow, and where the owner or the owners there are the center of everything. So everyone comes to the owner to ask questions, or the clients always go to them. And how do they necessarily scale from that point to where what I call the enterprise model, moving away from an owner-centric model to an enterprise model, how they move through that transition. And that can be quite challenging, and not only for the business structurally, but also the owner. What's the role of the owner in the future? Because sometimes they need to let go of a little bit of that control. Anyway, that's probably
let go of the reins a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, never heard this story before. Never heard that story before. And I'm pretty sure they're making wins all along the way, right, Charlie?
Oh, 100%. Yep.
You have a dangerous last name for what you do.
Comes with a guarantee.
You are like the James Bond of consulting. No.
I think it's the guarantee.
Yeah, that's it. It's the Winn guarantee. Ooh,
actually,
that's some branding.
I'm also a sports coach. I coach rugby. So I've never heard a joke about my surname.
No.
Associated in sport or in business. Never.
It's too easy. It's just too easy.
100%. Yes. Yeah.
Awesome, guys.
It's all in the name, man. It's all in the name.
It's actually not even his real last name. He changed it specifically for this. Cool. Let's launch into it. The first question we have about, and this is actually quite a debated topic that we hear about all the time, especially in our industry. And I'm going to put it out there. Everyone says you got a niche, and we've found it quite difficult over the years to really start to narrow down our focus. And there are industries that we particularly look to focus on. I'd love to get your thoughts on the idea of niching, and some if you have some client examples as well. How are, or what are the different methodologies around niching for market, and the importance of doing so? I'll hit this little baby here, and let's go.
Let's
Who
get
wants to
going.
jump in first? I think we'll throw it down to Charlie, because Charlie, you kind of gave us a little bit of a insight into an experience you have recently.
Yeah. So niching, from the way I work with businesses, is, I think it's really critical, and I think it's the way that they can differentiate themselves, and how necessary they can provide the overarching clarity on what they do is by niching down. So there are pros and cons around niching. You know, are you reducing your potential customers or your clients? But often, if you can niche down, you can usually be charging at a premium as well, because you're solving that particular problem. But by getting that niche, you need to understand what that is. You need to get close and understand them. So an example that you referenced there, Bernard, was actually, I'm working with a manufacturing organization who are growing tremendously, and they are niching by focusing more on the types of products that they are going to be selling. So Australian made actually is going to be one of their ones. So it's then leveraging off that shift of focus from overseas,
An offshore product,
offshore products, then actually having the brand, that Australian made focus. So they can also then be charging that premium for Australian made. And they're also then heading into the sports segment, and so merchandising for sporting clubs, and larger ones or smaller, any of them. But ultimately, that's also then a niche that, and the seasonality around that. They also work in, which is a different brand they're going to go after, in the music industry as well. So it's kind of that fast turnaround and quick turnaround, but they're all going to be different brands. So I highly recommend or push them and encourage them to head in that direction. Anyway, that's one example.
That's interesting. So they've got that kind of USP for the market, which is that Australian made, which is, I think right now is highly sought after, not only nationally, but also internationally. The whole Australia brand sticker has a lot of weight in market. And then they're kind of channeling it towards particular industries that have that requirement for fast turnaround products. So music and what was the first sport? So that's Saurabh, what about you? What's an experience that you've had around the niching space, and also your ideology around it?
Sure. Look, I think I kind of completely agree in a way with Charlie and what he's talking about. But sometimes, and I work with a lot of startups. Now, in a startup space, I mean, let's take a small example. I was just working with a guy who has just started an electrical kind of business. So a very small business, starting out. He's got a couple of mates. So there are 3 or 4 founders who are doing it. So at this stage, they haven't found their niche. So they are working with all different things. So for example, they are working with builders, they're working with gardens. So they are doing all the things for now. So the idea when I was working with them was, hey, you know what? For a start, it's okay. You will eventually find your niche, because you will start to get people to know that, well, this is something you're doing really great. People will focus on that, and then you will eventually go towards your niche. So I think what Charlie is saying is exactly right. I mean, you do need to find your niche eventually, but then sometimes with the startup phase, it becomes kind of a bit difficult. They're trying to put their hands into a lot of things right now. They will eventually get there. They'll definitely get there.
So there's kind of essentially there's like a tipping point. There's a tipping point where it becomes more effective as a business to start to niche. And I talked earlier about our business and how we've kind of serviced everyone out in the sun, which is kind of where we're at when in your example, Saurabh. And now we are trying to be more particular about the type of clientele. But instead of industry focuses, which we do have industry focuses based on the kind of industries we love working with that have brought us great projects. But what we're really niching towards is a moment in time in a business when they have a greatest need for what the solution that we can provide. And I think that's a slightly different approach. So we're looking at that business when it kind of tips over that 20 to 80 odd people, and they notice that the handshakes and the relationships are not getting them in the leads that they need anymore, and the amount of resource they require to deliver the next growth stage of their business is greater than their hiring power. they would have to hire a team of 5 in order to compensate for what we would do. We would be able to do for them. So then instead, they often hire 1, and we become then a resource that enables their team to put together a strategy and then put that strategy into effect. So I think quite often niching is more typically talked about in regards to particular industries. But it was kind of cool to hear about the USP and ours as well being more of a solutions niche based on a particular time stamp or time stage. I'll stop interrupting Grant now because I know he's just chomping at the bit to get in.
Oh, it's so long here, Bernard. But I think the question I really want to ask both of you is the fact is that niching is great to just say that. But once again, it doesn't necessarily mean profitability. So therefore, what businesses tend to do is they tend to do multiple things to try and cover the overhead. How best does a business overcome this niching and still make it profitable when they've got a big overhead that they need to come? That's why they tend to expand into other areas.
So from my perspective, it's providing that all the back office is usually provided for all of those brands at the front. And so whether everything from HR or all your systems or all that is provided, but you're then using the different brand and their brand identities and USPs as your client-facing space, and that's really kind of a group style with then your different brands under there. So
so you're not impacting the inner workings. You're just the way you talk to market. Your communication strategy changes.
So I work a lot with values. So we'd have different brand values for those different ones, whereas your core values or the values that you as a business work with will be the same across all those, as an example.
And Saurabh?
Fantastic. So my quick thought on that is, and a lot of times I work with clients, it's about the communication strategy, what you talked about, Bernard. So what we do is we say, well, put into the market 2 or 3 niche things that you can really target on. So, your marketing can be based on those things, but then you can still provide other things because, for example, you already have a back-end office. You already have the people who can do the jobs for you. So yes, out there in the market, there are 2 or 3 niches that you are providing in terms of the market, but then you can still provide other services if someone is asking for it. So to cover the overhead expenses that you have, then you're not saying no to the clients as well. And because you've got systems ready, you can still take them on board.
And that's sort of what we experience as well. Like timer is finished, but that's exactly what we've experienced as well. Is that by niching to particular industries, we actually haven't neglected any of the other clients that would be coming our way anyway. We've just found more of the ones that we particularly want to talk to are arriving at our door more often.
Yeah.
Good point.
Fantastic. Good point.
Grant, was there anything else you wanted to wrap up before I move on to the next one?
For all business owners, there's this constant debate. I think it's a case of defining your brand value and your brand promise and be able to enhance that expertise or whatever you carry that out on. But I think as soon as you diverse in too many areas, you dilute your budgets, you dilute your management style, you dilute your delivery style, and therefore you actually just diffuse the brand value. So I think it's imperative that what Charles says, get back to the values and make sure that those touch points are extremely valuable in getting implemented.
I like the idea as well of having group values that kind of encompass like this is who we are as an operation. Now, what we end up doing with that resource is may change and adapt depending on what's happening with the market, but who we are never changes. This is the standard that we've set for who we are.
I refer to them as core values, and your point, Grant, there needs to be synergy between those niching brands, and so we've talked about different price points, which you referred in the car example before we came on, but also are you providing synergies of different solutions for a client, so upstream or downstream, and then of course different other. We use the example of the Australian made and the sporting. Yeah. Anyway, I think we've gone well over, haven't we?
Yeah. This happens, hence the time.
In saying that, I'm just going to take 20 seconds here, Bernard. I'm going to ask you a question, Grant, as well. What do you guys think? What do you guys think in terms of, yes, it's great to have the brand value and all that. We all understand that. Let's say a client comes in, he's according to your niche, but then the client now requests you to add or, do more services or provide more services, which you can provide. What would you do in that case? Would you say no, that's not part of my niche, I won't do it, or would you still take it on board because it's your existing client and he's the one who's going to keep on going? What's your thoughts on that now?
Look, I think what's very important is that I think you must be careful not to overpromise and underdeliver. So if it's within your fold, within your team's ability, then I would say maintain it. If you can't, or it is out of your realm, then rather than buy it in, work it under your umbrella, but at the same time let their expertise shine, and you still look like the glory because you are managing the whole process.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens with us when there are things that are outside of our fold or outside of the maybe the sophistication of the skill set that we have. We often work with our client to look at a way that we can wrap it all into the fold. So quite often, a lot of our retainers will include our service providers as well, so that they're still dealing with one point of call, which is essentially the model. You have one point of call that knows the entire operation, your entire operation, top to bottom, and then we manage all the resources for you. So then instead of putting more workload on you, more approvals, more emails, etc., you don't have to worry about that. We've got that under control. We take care of it.
And I think that was my point when I was saying that yes, in the brand value, in the communication, you provide the niche, but then if a client comes in and you're providing as a holistic, well, yes, we are happy. We've got the team, we've got the people, we have the resources, we can do it for you. We don't want to let you go anyways. So I mean that was kind of the point I was trying to make.
See, this is how we know we're in trouble. This is how we know we're in trouble.
That's it.
Timer switches off. Yeah. I don't care about you anymore. On to the next question, and we kind of dipped in this a little bit, which is really cool. Is that we talked about kind of separating brands and creating a group brand. When is it a good time for a business to potentially consider breaking into different subset brands of differing value, and then focusing those brands on different channels? And what's the process they should go through for doing that? What's the best way for them to actually affect that or impact that? Let me hit this little timer here.
Let's get going.
And who wants to jump in first?
Rob, I think you should go first.
Oh, look, I think when do they separate the brands based on different markets? I guess it just depends on what product or what service a company is providing. That's what I feel. And I'll give an example. I'm working with a client right now. So they do more of executive coaching side of things. They also work with the government as well in terms of providing Business Connect, which is a business advisory service. And they also provide RTO-based, which is your certification-based training as well. So what they have done in that circumstances, they have separated the certification side of things, but then in terms of the executive coaching and business advisory and the government clients, they have kept that as part of one brand itself. So for the certification, it's a different brand, different umbrella, but then for these things which are kind of working together, they have kept it under the same brand. So I guess it just depends exactly because of the synergy. So I think it just depends on what you're trying to achieve from it and how the market is going to perceive you. So, and with the car example that we talked about, if we have a low-end car and if you're going to be brand, it's not going to work. So it's good to separate those brands from that perspective. But if it's a similar kind of product that we are talking about or service, maybe it could be under the same umbrella.
Charles, yourself?
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, so I think under using the same example of the manufacturing one, working with them, we've identified that really that what they do. So let's say, or they really saturated the music space, and they were just smashing that. So they really had their operational processes and their sales and marketing process in that space humming, and they felt that they were starting to saturate that market. So to continue to grow their business, they need to look for other markets, and so that's where the other brands, rather than necessarily being seen in the original target market or kind of everything for everyone, they've then created that separate one. So they're using it to grow their additional revenue stream ultimately, but staying relevant to their target market. So that's another way that you can do it.
Yeah, it's kind of like focusing the channel around that particular offering. I have a question kind of around this space, because we did talk about the car example earlier on, where you look at brands like Toyota Lexus, Nissan Infiniti, Smart Car, Mercedes, etc. Are there, what I kind of feel, in particular with the Toyota Lexus example, is that for me as a buyer, I look at the Lexus brand and I don't really value it very highly, because I'm like, well, I know essentially it's all coming out of similar, if not the same, manufacturing process that Toyota went through, which is an amazing brand. But why would I spend 4 times as much on a vehicle if I could just essentially buy the Toyota? And yes, the engine might be bigger or slightly better or anything, but you can just tune the Toyota too. So you're still saving a significant amount of money. Do you think that in certain spaces or is it that if certain brands are too closely related in market, or there's too much knowledge around those two separate brands in market, that it actually doesn't have that impact that the business is looking to achieve by separating those or creating that sub brand under the group?
So from my perspective, you've hit the nail on the head in that if they can't create a totally separate brand identity and association with that brand that has that differentiating value perception, at least perception, we've just talked about a brand association. You've got the product as well under there, and the product elements, the functionality of that product, whatever that is, whether it is a bigger engine, etc. So you've got to differentiate in both spaces, and and how the strategies around positioning those brands, becomes really important when you're trying to do what you're saying there. That's at least my perspective. They're going to be probably going for slightly different target markets as well, but they're going to need to really position those brands quite differently, and that's their challenge. If they don't do that, then they're going to be cannibalizing them.
Cannibalizing the other brand. Yeah. And that's kind of the experience I've seen in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to any brand answering a simple question of why they are doing this. So unless they have an answer to that why, we can talk about everything in the world. But if they are not true to that why they want to separate these brands, what are they actually targeting? Then we can have everything in the world, but it's still not going to work.
Yeah.
So I think that answer to that simple question of why, I think that will probably make a lot more sense in terms of, do we need a separate brand, do we not, and I think it goes from there. A quick example, I was working with a software company. They have been doing softwares and all that, which is great, but now they are thinking about creating an app and they want to take it to the market, go for the funding and all those kind of things. For that very reason, we decided, well, let's separate those things, because now you're not getting the funding under this brand, you're getting the funding under a completely separate app that you're trying to create for the market. So for this reason, yes, separate entities, separate brand, although the directors are going to be same, but then we have separated it completely. So again, that question of why we are doing it, I think that solves a lot of answers in this.
Yeah, and I think that's
as mentioned there, which is very important, is the fact that you've got to educate people to the value that you bring. And I think that's when people are confused. I think the example about the car, the Lexus, I think is a very good example. I think the fact is that when funds are coming into market other diversities of a business, but I think you've got to educate people to the value that you're bringing them. And I think that is ultimate what is always forgotten. It's always about the glory, but not about the actual elements. And I think we've got to bring the elements forward first.
Yeah, I think on that example, specifically around the car example and what Saurabh was saying, and Charlie, you had a story about this as well earlier, that when the brand wanted to extend into a different service suite, because it didn't resonate with their current market, they created the second brand so it could then stand alone as that service. And there's opportunities for them to have a blend or a harmony between those two brands, and there's a very distinctive separation. And I think that's where brands like, I think that's where in the car brands that gets lost sometime, because essentially a car and a car, they're both cars. So the only thing that really differentiates it is the finishes, and then whether or not the car is more powerful, et cetera, et cetera. What always fell over for me is that I actually worked in a used car lot when I was in Denver, and we would order parts for a Lexus and they would come wrapped in Toyota packaging. And that just completely demolished my perception of the brand, because I'm like, but they're literally the same thing. Like, you're sending me the parts from the same guys.
Yeah.
Whereas what I like about the Infiniti Nissan brands, and if you look at the way the European brands do it, if you're buying a Skoda, you're never going to get Volkswagen parts. If you buy a Volkswagen, you're not going to end up with Audi parts. Like, they're very distinctively different brands, and you're buying a different product. Now, sometimes they do share things like chassis and you know, and that happens across all car brands. They buy things from each other, you know. But it was not. There's actually a separation in, I think, the operation of those entities that sit underneath the group, with a philosophy or a brand promise that has them all meet in the middle. And I think when a group brand loses that, that's when it starts to lose its impact on market.
Yeah, I think that's a really fascinating point. In fact, I think right back maybe in the previous one, I talked about having the same back office. What you're talking about, which is it's the next evolution, is to actually separate out those businesses, and maybe you just have your overarching. It could even just be the board that sits at that level, and maybe you then got your CEOs of the different brands. So that then is taking that to that next level, which is so they're standalone entities, and I'm sure they've probably got their own P&Ls, etc. At that point, and that's then when really, even though they've probably got the same owners, or maybe on this list on the stock exchange under the same space, they are ultimately, in all intents and purposes, different companies.
Yeah,
that's the next evolution, isn't it?
That's actually a perfect example. And while we are talking, I remembered about the solar guys that I'm working with. They've got one company which is doing a turnover of $30 million, number 2 in the market, and they've got 3 different entities doing similar stuff, just using different I would say the solar panels, and they are number 3 and number 4 in the market. Same company, everything is same. They've got the same warehouse, but just because they're targeting different markets, I suppose, they have separated it. One is doing $30 million, the other one is doing $10 million. When I think it as a group, it's worth 50-60 million. But then when I think it separately, they are all completely different entities altogether. With same back office. Everything's
well, it works quite successful. Look at
Sorry, Bernard was saying something.
Look in the cola brands with Coca-Cola. They own Pump, they own Mount Franklin, they own it. There's another sub brand that sits underneath. Each one's at a separate price point. When you go in and you buy your water, all you care is that you're getting water, you know. And then the only thing that differentiates is the size of the bottle and the function of the bottle. That's where Pump has its market, you know, the fact that it has the pump top versus the other ones that all have twist caps, right? So it's those nuances that make the difference. And I think also understanding the expectation of your market. You know, when you're buying, like in the car example, when you're buying prestige, you want to feel like you're buying prestige, you know? You don't want to be paying prestige and buying something else. And I think that's where you got to make sure that one brand doesn't cannibalize the other. On to our last question, and then we can wrap this baby up. We love talking in this episode. We should have made it a 10-minute clock, man. And every time I'm going to lose this phone, I'm going to have to figure out how to turn it on, fingerprint. Cool. So the last question I have, and while I'm asking it, I'm gonna try and do this and make it look really smooth and sophisticated. Hey, look at that.
There you go.
Amazing.
I think. Thanks, guys. I've done it only. I think, what is this? The 84th show or something. The last question I have is, what are your thoughts on how to approach marketing when with a focus on growth? So there are so many different channels that people can be looking at, and you guys are experiencing multiple different businesses when you are having these conversations around how to build their brand, building a group, etc. What are some of the approaches that you guys have seen or are that are coming to mind that you've seen some success with across different brands that you're working with?
Sure. Yeah. Look, I'm happy to go first in this once your timer is on.
It's all good.
Yep. There you go. So currently, so I'm actually working with a few clients right now, and what I'm finding is a lot of times clients think about marketing from what their thought process is. So some people think, well, once I start doing face-to-face marketing, that's it. I don't need anything else. What I generally feel is marketing should be a holistic approach. You have to have different touch points where your customers can actually find you. So it's not necessary that when you're doing online marketing, you don't really need to do face-to-face. Again, it depends on the industry, but sometimes you got to have the whole holistic approach. It's like you find, I mean, I always talk about Coca-Cola as a brand. You know, I mean, they'll be online. They are on the billboards. They are on the sports stadiums. They're everywhere. We all know what Coca-Cola is, and they're still out there doing that. But then there are different touch points as well. So when it comes down to marketing, I see a brand which is there in the corner. I've spoken to someone face to face. I go online. I think about it. The brand is there online. Suddenly I think, yep, you know, brand value. I'm happy to buy something from these people or as a service as well. So the brand marketing approach has to be holistic. And that's what I'm seeing when it comes down to the growth side of things. At the start, when you're starting out, it could depend on how much you got in terms of funding, the budget that you have. But I think when you're looking at the growth, I think you just need to think about it as a holistic approach. You have to have different touch points.
Yeah.
When it comes down
We talk to people about that, especially when people invest a lot of their marketing into channels that they don't control. We always talk to people about in your marketing suite, you should have the channels you control and then the channels you don't control. Why? Because when the channels you don't control change the rules, you need something to then lean back on. You still need something there in your marketing suite. And that's what happens with quite a few of our clients, especially with Facebook. I think it was early last year. They changed all the parameters around their advertising. All of a sudden, people went from getting 50, 60 leads a week to getting like 1 or 0 a week. And that's because their entire focus was on that particular channel. And the sales team was so used to the leads coming in, they didn't even know how to sell anymore. They weren't used to marketing in any other way or selling in any other way. So then they had to like kind of rebuild like babies learning to walk again, because they had become so indoctrinated to one particular channel.
Charles?
So at least from a branding perspective, the journey that I've worked with one company on is that I kind of mentioned them earlier, where they were a printing organization, and they wanted to reposition themselves as an agency with a printing arm. So they rebranded, and they then so they totally rebranded and elevated that brand and the positioning of that brand. And from a marketing perspective and the integration with their sales then became quite key. And they need to spend money to kind of get that positioning out there and to make it aware that they're going more direct to their end client rather than being a supplier to marketing agencies. So that's what was take out. That was their strategy, which has been really quite successful. And then from a growth perspective, their perspective was to then provide other services that those clients were asking for, whether it's creative, whether it's some software that might need to be managing that space. So that's what they've all installation that they did a lot of point of sale, which they came from that history of printing. So there was installation of stuff in convenience stores or billboards, etc. So they also then had that installation brand as well. So that's another way, at least from a branding perspective, as opposed to kind of pure marketing. That's the approach to growth that I think might be a good example for the listeners.
Look, I think marketing is a very overwhelming subject, and because there's so much to it, I think that it's a case of, where we play at is to try and really just simplify the process without making it overcomplicated. I think there's a lot of noise out there. I think it's a case of getting the breadcrumb approach of just following consistency as to what works. And what works, then you just keep on adding to it. What doesn't work, diminish, and then just try and find something new. I think it's important to evolve, but I don't think you must keep on changing everything. I think you just need to keep on trying things, and that's what we call progression. But what do you say is a bottleneck when it comes to implementing marketing with these clients that you're dealing with?
Bottleneck. It's often the owners themselves and wanting control. But which often is quite relevant. That you need to make sure you're positioning. It's a big step often to rebrand. I'm talking branding again rather than the marketing. It's a big step to rebrand or to relaunch or to shift your positioning of your brand or add a brand into your suite of brands. But ultimately, it is that it's getting that the buy-in from all the key stakeholders. I think is really the key part, and getting that time with those people. At least that's what I've found. So maybe you can.
Yeah, so I think with the bottlenecks, and especially with Grant's question in terms of marketing, what I'm finding is some clients, they have been doing something for past 20 years. Suddenly what Bernard was saying, Facebook has changed their algorithm and things have changed. It's like they still feel that they still want to do that. And they are, again, they are probably stopping their own success somewhere. So it's like, no, you need to change your mindset and think marketing as an approach where if you're not an expert, let's get an expert team in, like you said, and let them handle those things. Why do you have to do it yourself? Sometimes, yes, I understand there are budget constraints and all those kind of things. But sometimes if you don't have the budget constraint and you're already spending money somewhere which is not giving you leads, let's get an experts in. Let's leave it to the experts to do their job, and then you can focus on what you do, which is your service, your product that you're providing. So I think that's the bottleneck. It's like you're yourself the one who's stopping the success.
People often think that it's more expensive than it needs to be as well. They kind of stop themselves before they even give themselves a shot. And if you have a good agency, and what we do is we always work backwards. So we reverse brief everything, and then we work backwards with the budget as well. So we're like, let's come up with a budget that's effective for the business and work backwards from there. How much of this do we need to pour into X different channels that's going to have the most effective return for the business? And I think a lot of businesses go, oh, I've heard it costs this much to get into this, and this much to get into that, and this much to get into that. So I'll just focus on one, this or that, Did you like that? Grant is like, it's enough. Stop talking.
I'm just trying to indicate to Bernard, otherwise we're going to go for another 10 more minutes.
No, we won't. I think that was a good place to wrap it up, guys. There was a ton of information there for everyone that was listening. Hopefully you had a pen and paper. We're taking down a couple of notes because I think there's a lot to walk away with. Or rewatch it. Yeah, just watch it 20 times. And then when you finish watching it, take a little cut of it, tag us and share it, and then and tell everyone else about it too. That's a great idea, yeah?
Awesome.
That's an extended marketing.
Good marketing ideas there.
Yeah, awesome.
Grant, any last thoughts to wrap up the show?
Look, as always, Bernard, I think it's important to mention the fact that this has been a lot of edutainment in the sense that we've brought entertainment, but we've brought the education in the sense that we've realized that marketing is like a Rubik's Cube. It's got 6 sides or 9 blocks aside, but you can twist and turn, but you have to work with a game plan. And I think the 2 gentlemen have shown us today that game plan is what makes businesses valuable by educating the market. And therefore, you just got to keep on growing your business. You've got no other choice. So therefore, implement the marketing.
And therefore, just call Lucidity.
Yeah.
That was the way he slips in the sales pitch right there. Saurabh and Charlie, thank you so much for joining us. That was a phenomenal show. I think what came out of it for me was just, like Grant said, the strategy side of things, but looking at your strategy in more than just the discipline of marketing versus sales versus lead generation versus, actually looking at it in a holistic approach at how does the market actually consume our brand, and is the right market consuming it? Are we talking to the right people? And if not, do we then look at either niching the brand towards the market we want to be talking to, or dividing the brand, creating more brand entities that can target and talk to different markets? I think that's a really phenomenal thing to take away from this show, that there are different approaches to the way that you actually build the brand, rather than just trying to force feed a particular a market with a particular brand that you've created. Awesome. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. For everyone that's listening, please like, comment, share. If you have guests that you'd like to bring onto the show, even our guests, if they have guests that they would like us to present on the show that you think might be a great fit for the show, we're always looking for people to pop in the show. And we want to talk about things that are a little bit controversial, like whether or not you should niche your brand. Grant likes to get a little hot under the collar. So if you can heat him up, he's a fiery firecracker, this guy. That's where he gets the head fire starter title from. Awesome, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. I think I've wrapped it up properly, right, Grant? Did I forget anything?
I think you have. I think just like, share, send us a topic that we can unbundle. If you want to be a guest, hit us. But thanks very much for your sharing. Guys, thank you very much for your insight. We really appreciate it. We look forward to having you back on the show.
Cool.
Awesome.
And thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
Thank you very much for having us as well.